"Sir, your wife's laptop is fixed, but I need to talk to you privately," said Jake, the technician at the electronics store, looking nervously around before whispering, "Leave your house now, sir. Cancel your cards, change your passwords, and leave your house today." I was at Computer Fix, a small shop in downtown Portland, Oregon, just to pick up my wife Rebecca's laptop, which had broken last week. The screen had cracked after she dropped it on the kitchen floor, or at least that's what she told me. I frowned, confused. "What are you talking about, Jake? Is there a problem with the device?" Jake, a thin guy in his mid-20s with tattoos on his arms, looked around once more before opening the laptop in front of me. "It's not the device, sir. When I tested the system after the repair, a notification popped up on WhatsApp. I accidentally saw the messages and—" His voice faltered for a moment. "Sir, your wife and son are planning to kill you." The world seemed to stop around me. The noise of traffic outside, the hum of computers being repaired, everything was muffled as Jake's words echoed in my head. "My name is Andrew, I'm 62 years old, and until 5 minutes ago, I believed I had a perfectly normal life. I'm a retired accountant, living in a comfortable house in the suburbs of Portland with my wife Rebecca, who is 58. We have a son, Michael, who is 32 and has been married for 4 years to a woman named Jennifer. Rebecca has always been a devoted wife. I met her 15 years ago in a walking group. She had recently divorced, and I had been a widower for 3 years. We married after 2 years of dating in a small, intimate ceremony. Michael is my son from my first marriage. When Rebecca came into our lives, he was 17 and going through a typical rebellious phase of adolescence. Rebecca was patient, loving, and gradually won a special place in his heart. Or at least that's what I thought. "Show me," I said hoarsely, still trying to process what was happening. Jake navigated to a WhatsApp conversation between Rebecca and Michael. My stomach churned when I saw the first message. "Andrew is starting to ask a lot of questions about the finances. I think he suspects the withdrawals." Michael's reply came right below, "Maybe it's time to speed up the plan, Mom. His life insurance is worth $800,000. With the sale of the house, we'll have over $1.5 million to start our new life in California." I leaned on the counter, feeling my legs go weak. This can't be true," I muttered, more to myself than to Jake. "I'm sorry, sir," he said, clearly uncomfortable. I tried to ignore it, but when I saw the medications and dosages, I couldn't keep quiet. I kept reading, each line a stab in the chest. They discussed methods, talked about how to make it look like a natural heart attack. Michael mentioned that he had already consulted a doctor about my history of heart problems I didn't even know I had. "Rebecca, will he suspect anything if I insist he take the new blood pressure medication?" Michael asked in a message from 3 days ago. "No, if we say Dr. Martinez recommended it. He trusts the doctor," Rebecca replied. "And Michael, don't forget, it has to look natural. Don't rush it." Jake closed the laptop carefully. "Sir, you need to leave the house. They could try something at any moment." I was in shock, but part of my mind was already beginning to process the information analytically. 40 years as an accountant had taught me to examine numbers and patterns, to identify discrepancies. And now, thinking back over the last few months, some details were starting to make sense. The new medications Rebecca insisted I take. Michael's frequent visits, always bringing special vitamins that were supposed to give me more energy. The way Rebecca had been asking about my will lately, about life insurance, always in a casual way. "Jake," I said, my voice growing firm, "can you make a copy of those messages? I'm going to need evidence." He nodded, clearly relieved that I was taking the situation seriously. "Sure, sir. I'll take pictures of everything." While Jake worked, my mind raced. I couldn't just run away. I needed a plan, I needed more evidence, and most importantly, I needed to understand the full extent of this conspiracy. If you're following this story and are as shocked as I am, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what I discovered in the next few days changed everything I thought I knew about my own family. I took the laptop and the photos Jake had taken, thanked him for his honesty, and left the store with my heart pounding. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and took several deep breaths, trying to organize my thoughts. Rebecca would be waiting for me at home, probably eager to get the laptop back. Michael said he would stop by for dinner that night, as he always did on Wednesdays. A family tradition I had always cherished. Now I knew that these visits had a much more sinister purpose. I started the car and began driving back home, but my mind was already forming a plan. They thought I was just a naive old accountant, easy to manipulate and eliminate. They were about to find out that they had completely underestimated the man they planned to murder. I drove on autopilot through the familiar streets of Portland, my mind processing every detail of the last few weeks. The paranoia I had felt was not paranoia, it was survival instinct. The special vitamins Michael religiously brought every Wednesday. Rebecca insisting I take the new blood pressure medication, even when I said I felt fine. The casual questions about my will, always disguised as loving concern. "Honey, are you sure your documents are up to date? It would be terrible if something happened and I couldn't honor your wishes," Rebecca had said just last week, stroking my hair as we watched TV. At the time, I found it touching. Now, I understood that it was a calculated mapping of my assets. I parked 2 blocks from home, still reluctant to go inside. I took out my phone and reread the photos Jake had taken of the messages. There were more conversations that I hadn't seen in my rush at the store. "Michael, are you sure Dr. Martinez won't suspect anything?" Rebecca asked in a message from 5 days ago. "Relax, Mom. He's known me since I was a kid. When I tell him I'm worried about Dad's high blood pressure, he'll prescribe the medication without question. And the drugs I'm going to replace will simulate a heart attack perfectly. It will look like he died in his sleep." Mom. Michael was calling Rebecca Mom. My son, who had resisted the idea of a stepmother for years, was now conspiring with her to murder me. When exactly had Rebecca transformed from a loving wife into a manipulative killer? And when had Michael stopped being my son and become my tormentor? I continued reading, discovering even more sinister layers of the plan. "Rebecca, have you thought about what we'll do if he doesn't take the medicine voluntarily?" Michael had asked. "I've thought about it. I can mix it into his food. Andrew trusts me so much that he would never suspect anything. Besides, he's been so distracted lately, he probably won't even notice the different taste." Distracted. I wasn't distracted, I was being slowly poisoned, and my body was reacting. The dizziness I attributed to age, the constant fatigue I thought was retirement, the memory lapses that made me make an appointment with a neurologist. Dr. Martinez. They had mentioned my family doctor. I picked up the phone and called the office. The receptionist, Karen, answered with the familiarity of 15 years of appointments. "Mr. Andrew. How are you? Your appointment isn't until next week." "Karen, did Michael call to make an appointment or talk to Dr. Martinez about me recently?" "Oh yes. What a thoughtful son you have. He was here on Monday, very concerned about your blood pressure. He said you've been having chest pains and dizziness. The doctor was concerned and has already set aside some new medications for you to try." My stomach sank. "Karen, I've never had chest pains or dizziness related to my blood pressure." Silence on the other end of the line. "But," Michael said, "he seemed so concerned, Mr. Andrew. He even brought notes about your symptoms." "Thank you, Karen. I'll talk to the doctor at my appointment." I hung up and leaned back in the car seat. The conspiracy was more elaborate than I had imagined. They weren't just planning my death, they were already constructing the medical narrative that would justify my natural heart attack. My cell phone rang. It was Rebecca. "Andrew, where are you? It's been an hour since you left to pick up my laptop." I took a deep breath, forcing normality into my voice. "I had to take care of a few things downtown. I'm on my way back." "That's good. Michael came home early today. He brought those vitamins you like and is helping to make dinner. We made your favorite dish." Of course they did. Probably loaded with the medication Michael had gotten from Dr. Martinez. Wonderful. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. I love you, honey." The words that once warmed my heart now sounded like a black widow's farewell to her prey. I drove slowly home, looking at my own street with different eyes. The white 2-story house with the garden that Rebecca meticulously tended now looked like a scene from a horror movie. The brightly lit windows that had always represented warmth and security now housed 2 murderers patiently planning my death. I parked in the garage and took several deep breaths. I needed to act normal, at least until I discovered the full extent of the conspiracy. As an accountant, I knew that every fraud leaves traces. And if Rebecca and Michael were planning to kill me for money, there were other financial aspects I needed to check. I entered through the back door, hearing cheerful voices coming from the kitchen. "Dad." Michael got up to hug me, the same warm display of affection I associated with our weekly dinners. "How was your day?" Now I could see the falseness behind the smile, the way his eyes didn't reflect genuine joy at seeing me. It was the careful performance of a man playing the role of a loving son. "It was good, son. How was yours?" "Productive. I was talking to Rebecca about your finances. She's worried because you've been forgetting to pay some bills." Another piece of the narrative. Establishing that I was losing my mental capacity. Forgetting? I asked, looking at Rebecca, who was stirring something in the pot with excessive attention. "Nothing serious, dear," she said without turning around. "Just a few bills that arrived and stayed on the table longer than usual. I thought we could set up a system for Michael to help us occasionally." "What kind of system?" Michael stepped forward. "Nothing complicated. Maybe I could have access to a secondary account, just for emergencies. And Rebecca mentioned it would be good to update the powers of attorney in case you get sick or something." They weren't wasting any time. Access to accounts, powers of attorney, establishing financial control before executing the murder. "Interesting," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Let's talk about it after dinner." Rebecca finally turned, handing me a glass of red wine I hadn't ordered. "Your favorite," she said with a smile. I held the glass, watching the ruby liquid against the light. Would it be paranoia to suspect it was poisoned, or sensible caution? "Cheers," Michael said, raising his own glass. "To family," Rebecca added. I brought the glass to my lips, pretending to drink while watching them over the rim. If I died today, it would look like a heart attack after a pleasant family dinner. Natural, without suspicion. But they had made a fatal mistake. They completely underestimated me. 40 years of analyzing corporate fraud had taught me that every criminal, no matter how clever they think they are, leaves traces. And while Rebecca and Michael believed they were executing the perfect crime, I was just beginning to track every move they had made. Dinner was going to be interesting. Very interesting. During dinner, I pretended to drink my wine while watching Rebecca and Michael's every move. Their performance was impressive. Genuine smiles, familiar conversation, affectionate gestures. If I hadn't known about the conspiracy, I would never have suspected that I was dining with two murderers. "Andrew, you've barely touched your wine," Rebecca remarked, her voice laden with feigned concern. "Don't you like it? It's that Cabernet you always rave about." "It's great," I replied, bringing the glass to my lips again without swallowing. "I'm just savoring it slowly." Michael leaned forward, his eyes shining with excessive interest. "Dad, have you been feeling well lately? Rebecca mentioned that you seem more tired." The question was asked with the perfect concern of a loving son, but now I could see the manipulation behind it. They were establishing symptoms to justify my future natural death. "I feel fine," I replied calmly. "Why do you ask?" "Nothing specific," Michael exchanged a quick glance with Rebecca. "Just, sometimes you seem a little confused. Last week, when I called, you forgot we had plans to meet." That was a lie. I had never forgotten an appointment with Michael. "I don't remember forgetting anything," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Rebecca chuckled softly, touching my hand. "Honey, that's exactly what Michael means. You don't remember because, well, you forgot." The circular logic was perfect. If I denied forgetting anything, it would be proof that I had forgotten. They were constructing a narrative where any defense on my part became evidence against me. "Maybe you should talk to Dr. Martinez about it," Michael suggested. "He mentioned some tests that might be helpful." "When did you talk to Dr. Martinez about me?" I asked directly. A brief moment of tension passed between them before Michael replied. "On Monday." I was concerned, so I called his office. He said it would be good to schedule some tests, especially considering, well, your age. My age. 52 years old, perfectly healthy until I began to be slowly poisoned by my own family. Dinner continued with more of these seemingly innocent exchanges. Every question about my health, every suggestion about doctors, every comment about my mental confusion was a carefully placed stone in the narrative that would justify my death. When we finished eating, Michael offered to wash the dishes while Rebecca made coffee. I took the opportunity to discreetly pour my wine into the plant next to the table. If there was poison in it, I didn't want even the plants to die because of me. "Andrew," Rebecca called from the kitchen, "can you come help me with something?" I found her rummaging through a drawer I rarely opened, where we kept old documents and miscellaneous papers. "I'm looking for that insurance policy you mentioned last month," she said, without looking at me. "The life insurance one." Michael thought it would be good to review the beneficiaries, make sure everything is up to date. My blood ran cold. They weren't just planning to kill me, they were already organizing the financial details of my afterlife. "Why are you two so interested in my life insurance lately?" I asked. Rebecca finally looked at me, her expression sincere and concerned. "Honey, it's not morbid interest. It's responsibility. If something happens to you, I need to know how to handle everything. And Michael is right, it would be better if he had some access to the main accounts, at least as a backup." "Backup for what?" "For when you can no longer manage things yourself," she said softly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "When you can no longer. Not if, when." Michael appeared in the kitchen doorway, drying his hands on a towel. "Did you find the papers?" "Still looking," Rebecca muttered, returning to the drawer. "Dad, do you keep important documents in a safe or something? It would be more organized to have everything in one place." Of course they wanted to know where I kept important documents. Probably to alter or destroy them after my death. "I have some important papers at the bank," I replied vaguely. "Which bank?" Michael asked quickly, then tried to hide his excessive interest. "I mean, in case I need anything." They weren't wasting any time. They wanted a complete map of my assets before eliminating me. That night, after Michael left and Rebecca went upstairs to take a shower, I sat alone in the living room processing everything I had discovered. It wasn't just a vague murder plan, it was a carefully orchestrated, multi-layered operation. I grabbed my laptop and began investigating our finances online. What I discovered alarmed me even more. Over the past 6 months, small amounts had been transferred from our joint accounts to an account I didn't know about. Never large enough to attract attention, $200 here, $300 there, but adding up to nearly $8,000. Rebecca had access to our accounts as my wife, but these transfers were always made when I was away from home, at specific times that suggested careful planning. There was more. Our life insurance had been changed 3 months ago. The coverage amount had been increased significantly, from $300,000 to $800,000. A change I did not authorize or sign. Or at least I didn't remember signing it. I searched through my files until I found the documentation. There was my signature, notarized. But I didn't remember being at a notary's office in the last few months. I examined the signature carefully. It was extremely similar to mine, but there were slight differences in the curves that I always made in a specific way. Too small to be detected by untrained eyes, but clearly visible to someone who has been signing their own name for 52 years. My signature had been forged. I continued investigating and discovered other discrepancies. Changes to the will that I didn't remember authorizing. Changes to bank accounts. Small legal adjustments that, individually, would seem administrative, but collectively transferred significant control of my assets to Rebecca and established Michael as the primary beneficiary of everything. It was such a complex financial web that it must have taken months to weave. Rebecca came downstairs in her bathrobe, her hair still damp from her shower. "Still awake, honey? What are you doing?" "Just organizing a few things," I replied, quickly closing my laptop. She came over and kissed my forehead with genuine tenderness. "Don't work too late. You've been so tired lately." Tired because I was being slowly poisoned, I thought, but I just smiled. "I'll be up in a few minutes." After she went upstairs, I called Jake, the technician from the electronics store. It was late, but his number was on the card he gave me. "Andrew? Everything okay?" "Jake, I need more help. Can you recover older messages from Rebecca's laptop? I want to know how long this has been going on." "I can try. WhatsApp messages are saved in the backup. Do you want me to take a look?" "Yes." "And Jake, do you know any lawyers? Someone discreet." "My cousin works at a firm downtown. He specializes in criminal law. Do you want his contact information?" "Yes." And Jake, thank you. You saved my life. Not yet, sir. But we'll get there. I hung up and leaned back in my chair, my mind now working with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The symptoms of confusion, fatigue, memory lapses, it all made sense now. I wasn't aging or developing dementia. I was being methodically poisoned to create symptoms that would justify my death. But Rebecca and Michael had made a fatal mistake in underestimating me. 40 years as an accountant had taught me that every fraud, no matter how elaborate, leaves traces. And every person who commits fraud, no matter how smart they think they are, eventually becomes overconfident and makes mistakes. They were about to find out they had picked the wrong victim. Climbing the stairs quietly, I looked at Rebecca sleeping peacefully in our bed. She looked so peaceful, so innocent. No one looking at her would ever guess that this woman was coldly plotting the murder of her own husband. But now I was no longer just a victim passively watching my own destruction. I was an experienced accountant with access to all the tools necessary to audit their every move. And when I had gathered all the evidence, Rebecca and Michael would discover that they had chosen to play with fire. And I was about to burn them completely. The next morning, I woke up before Rebecca and quietly went to the office in the basement. I called Jake's cousin, David Chun, a criminal lawyer who was available early for urgent cases. "Mr. Andrew, Jake briefly told me about your situation. Can I see you today? The sooner the better. 9 o'clock in my office. And bring all the evidence you've gathered so far." I discreetly printed out all the photos of the messages, the bank statements showing the unauthorized transfers, and the documentation of the forged life insurance policy. I organized everything into separate folders, numbered chronologically. 40 years of auditing experience had taught me that meticulous documentation was the difference between suspicion and irrefutable proof. Rebecca came down to the kitchen as I was putting the papers away. "You're up early, honey," she said, kissing my forehead. "Did you sleep well?" "Like a log," I lied. "I'm going out for a bit to take care of some business at the bank." "The bank?" Her eyes lit up with excessive interest. "Is there a problem?" "Nothing much. Just updating some information." In fact, I was heading straight to David Chen's office in downtown Portland, armed with enough evidence to send Rebecca and Michael to prison. David's office was on the 22nd floor of a commercial building. He was an Asian American man in his 40s, with a solid reputation for complex criminal cases. "Mr. Andrew," he said after meticulously reviewing each document, "what you have here is evidence of conspiracy to commit murder, document forgery, and financial fraud. This is extremely serious. What do we need to do? First, we need to ensure your safety. Second, we need to gather more evidence before involving the police. And third, we need to document any further attempts they make to harm you." David explained that the WhatsApp messages, while incriminating, had been obtained without legal authorization. We needed additional evidence that would be admissible in court. I recommend that you use a recorder during interactions with them. I will also connect you with a private investigator to monitor their activities when you are not present. Sarah Martinez was the private investigator David recommended. An expert in family fraud cases, she had worked as a detective for 15 years before opening her own agency. "Andrew," she said during our meeting that afternoon, "I'm going to install discreet surveillance equipment in your home. I'm also going to investigate Rebecca and Michael's financial history. If they've been planning this for months, they've surely left traces." 3 days later, Sarah returned with devastating information. "Rebecca has a criminal record," she announced, opening a thick folder. 12 years ago, in Phoenix, Arizona, she was investigated for the suspicious death of her first husband. He died of an apparent heart attack at age 53, after a series of health problems that began when she convinced him to change his will. My blood ran cold. What happened to the investigation? It was closed due to lack of evidence. But look at this. Sarah showed me photos of medical records. Her first husband had exactly the same symptoms you've been experiencing: fatigue, memory lapses, dizziness. And doctors found traces of digitalis in his system. Digitalis. Poison extracted from the foxglove plant. In small doses, it simulates heart problems. In larger doses, it causes death by cardiac arrest. Sarah continued to reveal the extent of the investigation. Michael isn't who he seems to be either. He has gambling debts of almost $200,000 with some very dangerous people in Las Vegas. I found emails where he promises payment by the end of the month. The pieces fit together perfectly. Rebecca was an experienced black widow who had chosen Michael as her accomplice because he desperately needed money. Together, they had developed a plan to eliminate me and divide my estate. There's more, Sarah said, pulling photographs from a separate folder. They met yesterday in Riverside Park. Our surveillance team captured the entire conversation. She handed me headphones connected to a digital recorder. Rebecca and Michael's voices were crystal clear. Andrew is getting more suspicious, Rebecca said. Yesterday he asked strange questions about the bank. Maybe we should speed up the schedule, Michael replied. How much longer do you think we can keep up the gradual poisoning? 2 more weeks, tops. After that, he'll start showing more obvious symptoms. We need to finish before he sees a different doctor. What if he gets suspicious before then? Rebecca's answer sent a chill down my spine. Then we'll have to improvise. A domestic accident. Falling down the stairs, car accident. Anything that seems natural for a man his age with heart problems. I took off my headphones, feeling nauseous. They weren't just planning to kill me, they were actively adjusting their methods based on my behavior. Sarah, how much more evidence do we need? Enough to guarantee conviction without the possibility of appeal, she replied firmly. I want them to spend decades in prison. I returned home that night with a digital recorder hidden in my shirt pocket and a carefully crafted plan. David had arranged a meeting with the district attorney for the following week, but first we needed to document their next attempts at poisoning. If this story of family betrayal is leaving you in shock like it did me, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see how this meticulously planned revenge will completely destroy their lives. Rebecca was preparing dinner when I walked in. Hi, honey. Michael called earlier. He's coming by tomorrow to talk about your finances. He brought an accountant friend who can help with some investments. An accountant friend. Probably another accomplice to facilitate the theft of my assets after my death. That's great, I replied, discreetly turning on the recorder. What kind of investments? Nothing too complicated. Just a few ways to optimize your resources while you're still, well, you know, healthy and able to make decisions. While you're still alive, she meant. Rebecca, I said calmly, can I ask you a question? Of course, dear. Why is everyone suddenly so interested in my finances? First Michael wanting powers of attorney, now investments. It seems very coordinated. I saw a flash of panic cross her eyes before she forced a smile. Honey, it's just concern. You've been so forgetful lately, and we want to make sure your interests are protected. Forgetful how? Well, she hesitated, yesterday you forgot where you put your car keys. Last week, you couldn't remember our neighbor's name. More lies to build the narrative of mental decline. I never forgot the keys or the neighbor's name. That night, lying next to Rebecca, I listened to her steady breathing and knew I was sleeping next to a serial killer who had killed at least one person before and was planning to kill me in a matter of weeks. But now I was no longer a passive victim watching my own destruction. I had a team of professionals, irrefutable evidence, and a plan that would turn Rebecca and Michael from predators into prey. They had spent months planning my death, believing I was just a naive old accountant. Tomorrow, when Michael brought his accountant friend to facilitate the theft of my assets, they would discover that they had completely underestimated their supposed victim. And that would be the last time either of them would ever underestimate Andrew again. The next morning, Michael arrived punctually at 10 o'clock, accompanied by a short man with glasses who introduced himself as Tony Marchetti, a financial advisor specializing in asset optimization for retirees. Dad, Tony is going to help us organize your investments more efficiently, Michael said, opening a folder full of documents. Especially considering your health situation. My health situation. They didn't even bother to hide it anymore. What kind of optimization? I asked, discreetly turning on the recorder in my pocket. Tony smiled with the oily confidence of someone who had done this before. Mr. Andrew, at your age and with the cognitive symptoms Michael has reported to me, the ideal thing would be to transfer some assets to a protective structure. This ensures that if you are no longer able to make decisions, your family will have immediate access to the resources. Sarah had warned me about this. It was exactly the same method used in the case of Rebecca's first husband, transferring assets before carrying out the murder, avoiding legal complications later. What cognitive symptoms did Michael report? I asked directly. Michael exchanged a quick glance with Tony before answering. Dad, the forgetfulness, the confusion. Yesterday you asked where the car was that was in the garage. Another lie. I never asked where the car was. Rebecca appeared in the room carrying a tray with coffee and homemade cookies. I made the special coffee you like, honey, she said, handing me a cup with an affectionate smile. The special coffee. Probably laced with digitalis. Thanks, I replied, holding the cup without drinking. Don't you guys want coffee? We already had some, Rebecca replied quickly. Tony began to explain the documents, all designed to transfer complete control of my assets to Rebecca, with Michael as secondary beneficiary. As he spoke, I watched their every move through eyes trained by experience. Rebecca constantly checked to see if I was drinking the coffee. Michael maintained excessive eye contact, studying my behavior for signs of mental confusion. Tony pressed for immediate signatures, citing tax windows that would soon close. It was a coordinated operation to rob me while slowly killing me. These documents are quite complex, I finally commented. I would like my own lawyer to review them before I sign. The reaction was instantaneous. Michael leaned forward, trying to look concerned. Dad, don't you trust me? I'm just trying to protect your interests. Of course I trust you, I replied calmly. But 40 years as an accountant have taught me never to sign anything without a thorough review. Tony frowned. Mr. Andrew, with all due respect, sometimes overanalysis can lead to decision paralysis, especially when there are cognitive issues involved. Rebecca approached, touching my shoulder with feigned tenderness. Honey, are you sure? Michael spent a lot of time organizing this for us. That's when my cell phone rang. It was David Chun. Andrew, can I talk to you for a moment? It's urgent. Sure, I replied, getting up. Excuse me. I left the room and answered in the hallway. David. The cameras Sarah installed captured something interesting. Rebecca put digitalis in the coffee she made for you this morning. We have the complete recording. My blood ran cold, but I kept my voice calm. I see. The detectives are on their way. Stay away from any food or drink they offer. Stay there for another 15 minutes. I returned to the room where the three of them were waiting anxiously for me. Everything okay? Michael asked. My lawyer wants to meet with me this afternoon to review the documents, I lied. We can finalize everything later. Frustration was visible on all three faces. Rebecca forced a smile. Of course, dear. But don't leave it too long. Tony has other commitments this week. Actually, Tony stood up abruptly, maybe we should reschedule. I need to check some tax issues first. He knew something was wrong. Experienced criminals develop an instinct for danger. Michael also stood up. Dad, did you even take your medication today? Dr. Martinez said it was important to maintain regularity. Another attempt to poison me, this time through counterfeit medication. Not yet, I replied. I'll take it after lunch. As they gathered their papers, I heard the distant sound of cars parking on the street. The detectives had arrived. Rebecca looked out the window and paled. Andrew, why are there police on our street? I don't know, I replied with absolute calm. Maybe some problem with the neighbors. Michael approached the window too, his expression changing from confusion to alarm when he saw the officers walking toward our door. Dad, he said, his voice trembling slightly, did you call the police? The doorbell rang before I could answer. I'll get it, I announced, walking calmly toward the door. Andrew, no. Rebecca shouted, but it was too late. I opened the door to find Detective Sarah Martinez and two other officers. Mr. Andrew, she said loudly enough to be heard in the living room, we have a search and seizure warrant related to suspicions of attempted murder and conspiracy. We need everyone to stay where they are. The silence in the room was deafening. I turned slowly to see Rebecca and Michael frozen in the middle of the room, Tony discreetly trying to reach for his briefcase. The looks of shock and panic on their faces were exactly what I had imagined during months of careful planning. Michael, I said calmly, I believe the detectives would like to talk to you about your sudden interest in my finances. That's when Rebecca tried to run. Sarah intercepted her before she reached the back door, handcuffs already in hand. Rebecca Henderson, you are under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder and conspiracy. Michael stood frozen, watching his accomplice being handcuffed. Tony tried to argue that he was just an innocent consultant, but when the detectives opened his briefcase and found documents pre-signed with my supposed signature, even he realized the game was over. Dad, Michael said, his voice breaking, I can explain. Can you explain why you planned to murder me for money? I asked directly. Or why you convinced Dr. Martinez that I was sick. Or maybe you can explain why Rebecca put poison in my coffee this morning. The color drained completely from his face. We have it all recorded, Sarah said, showing a recording device, including the conversations about digitalis dosages and simulating heart attacks. Rebecca, still handcuffed, finally exploded. You don't understand. He was wasting everything. Living like a stingy old man when he had a fortune. We deserved this life. Michael tried to silence her, but it was too late. And you, Michael, I continued, my voice gaining strength, my own stepson, coldly planned my death for gambling debts? How did you find out, he muttered. Because 40 years as an accountant taught me to recognize fraud, I replied. And you too left clues everywhere. As they were led away in handcuffs, Rebecca screamed one last time, You'll die alone, you stingy old man. Alone and with no one to inherit your precious fortune. I closed the door and leaned against it, finally allowing relief to wash over me. Months of silent terror, of living knowing that the people closest to me were plotting my death, were finally over. David arrived 20 minutes later, finding me sitting calmly in the living room, drinking tea in true safety for the first time in months. How are you feeling? He asked. Like someone who has just discovered he still has a lot to live for, I replied. But there was one last twist I hadn't expected. Sarah returned that afternoon with news that would change everything again. Andrew, Sarah said, opening a new folder, Rebecca wasn't just planning to kill you. We found evidence that she's done it before. 3 times. My blood ran cold. 3 times. Phoenix, Arizona, her first husband. Denver, Colorado, a wealthy 67-year-old boyfriend. And Tampa, Florida, another husband who died naturally after changing his will. Sarah spread photographs across the table. All 3 had the same symptoms as you. All died of apparent cardiac arrest. And in every case, Rebecca inherited considerable fortunes. The woman I thought I knew was a serial killer. Did Michael know? From the intercepted conversations, no. She manipulated him as much as she tried to manipulate you. She promised him $50,000 to pay off his gambling debts, but planned to eliminate him after she got his money. 2 weeks later, I sat in court watching Rebecca and Michael receive their sentences. Rebecca was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 4 counts of first-degree murder, including the 3 previous husbands that the detectives were able to investigate. Michael received 25 years for conspiracy and attempted murder. At the moment of sentencing, he finally looked me in the eye. Dad, he said, his voice breaking, I'm sorry. She convinced me that you were sick, that it would be merciful. Michael, I replied calmly, you chose money over family. Now you'll have plenty of time to think about that choice. I sold our house a week later. Every room was filled with memories tainted by betrayal. I bought a modern apartment in downtown Portland, near the office of David Chun, who had become more than my lawyer. He was a true friend. Medical tests confirmed that my body was fully recovering from the effects of the poisoning. Dr. Martinez, who had been innocently manipulated by Michael, became my personal physician, monitoring my recovery with special care. Jake, the technician who saved my life, received a reward of $10,000. I used part of the inheritance Rebecca never managed to steal to set up a protection fund for elderly victims of financial abuse. If this story of betrayal and revenge touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories where justice prevails over greed, as I always say to those who ask me about the experience. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter in prison. It was from Michael. Dad, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm in therapy here. I'm trying to understand how I got to this point. Rebecca showed me fake conversations you had with doctors, forged documents about your health. I genuinely thought you were suffering. That doesn't justify anything, but it explains how I was manipulated. One day when I get out of here, I'd like to try to redeem myself. I kept the letter without replying. Maybe someday, when the pain subsides, I'll consider some kind of reconciliation. But not now. On the first anniversary of Rebecca's arrest, David called me with surprising news. Andrew, they found 2 more victims. One in Texas, another in California. The FBI is investigating Rebecca as potentially the most successful serial killer of the last 20 years. Discovering that I had escaped a predator who had killed at least 5 people before me gave me a new perspective on my experience. I wasn't just the victim of a personal betrayal, I was the one who managed to stop a killing machine. Today, 2 years later, I live a completely different life. I have new friends, new hobbies, a new perspective. I've learned that family isn't blood or a signed piece of paper, it's the people who genuinely care about your well-being. Jake still fixes my electronics and always refuses payment. David and I have lunch every other week, discussing interesting cases from his office. Sarah has become a personal safety consultant for seniors, using my case as her primary study. And Rebecca? I hear that in prison she continues to try to manipulate other inmates, claiming innocence and blaming all of her victims. Some people never change. The last time I thought about her seriously was during a walk in the park where Sarah showed me the first pieces of evidence. Watching families playing, elderly couples walking hand in hand, I realized something fundamental. Rebecca tried to destroy my ability to trust, but she only taught me to trust better. Now I know how to identify manipulation, recognize warning signs, and value genuine relationships. Ironically, the woman who tried to kill me made me more alive than ever. Michael writes occasionally, his letters becoming more lucid as therapy progresses. Maybe one day I'll respond. Maybe one day we can rebuild some kind of relationship. But it will be on my terms, when I'm ready. If you've come this far on this journey of betrayal and justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment on your favorite part of the story. Share it with those who need to hear that even in the most desperate situations, there is always a way out for those who keep a cool head and act intelligently. The lesson I learned is simple: the most dangerous people are those who can imitate love perfectly. But true love never comes with attempts to control, isolate, or force changes in your personality. Rebecca thought she knew me well enough to destroy me. She discovered too late that an experienced accountant always keeps detailed records, including of betrayals. The last I heard, she was in solitary confinement for trying to organize an escape. Me? Well, I was opening the second office of my hedge fund, this time in Seattle. Justice, I discovered, is not just about punishing those who do wrong, it's about using the experience to protect others from going through the same suffering.